Okay.
Welcome to the World Tour of Meditation. Today I have with me Dr. Ray Gottlieb, who's the Dean of the College of Syntonic Optometry, a natural vision and light therapy expert. And Ray eliminated his myopia, which is incredible. Ray's also written a book, Attention and Memory Training, and he's invented presbyopia, which he's going to tell us more about. Ray, it's a real pleasure to have you on here. Thank you so much, and thanks for sorting out the audio and the timing and everything. It's a real treat to have you.
Well, thanks for including me. We'll see how it goes. Okay.
Thank you.
I'll try to be loud enough for you to hear.
Fantastic. So you're joining us from Florida today. That's right?
That's right.
Fantastic. Tell me how you got started on meditation as a topic to begin with.
Well, originally it was when I was 9. I don't know what triggered it. I don't remember. But I got it in my head that I wanted to be able to stand on my head like the yogis did. So I went to the local library and I looked around to see if I could find a book on yoga. And they didn't have any on yoga, but I found one on yodeling. And so I took that book home and I tried to learn how to yodel, but I'm not sure you can yodel very well at age 9. But there was, that's to say that there was always some kind of draw for self-improvement. It just seemed to be in my bloodstream to do that. And so what was the next phase? So I was working in New York City in 1966 or something around that year. And in the Village Voice, which is a newspaper, there was an article about Satchidananda opening a yoga place in New York City. And it's like, oh, great, here just, 20 years later. I said, now I can do yoga. So I went over to there and I started doing yoga, but I was only there for about a month, just in New York City. And anyway, that really sparked it, and I kept doing the yoga that I had learned. And then I went off to Europe for a couple of years, and or not a couple, about a year and a half, and really got into looking into meditation and yoga, and eventually moved back to Berkeley, where I went to optometry school, and started doing Tai Chi and doing yoga, got interested in body work, and eventually was walking down the street one day in Berkeley, and I walked into one of the bookstores and found a book about natural vision improvement by Bates. William Bates was an ophthalmologist who put together this approach. So yeah, I said, gee, it reminds me of Tai Chi, what he was writing about in meditation, and all these things that I was interested in. I was myopic, mild case of myopia, nearsightedness, and an optometrist. And I thought, well, gee, this is so much like the stuff that I'm interested in. Let me see if I can, if it'll work for me. And so I began to use the practices that Bates described to try to improve my vision, and about 6 months later, I had what they call a flash of clear vision, and they usually come like spontaneously after you've been working with what's called palming and sunning and edging and certain exercises or practices about, and it went away right away. I said, oh, my vision got really clear, and then I got so excited it went away, and which is not uncommon. So then I worked to see if I could actually make it happen. And so first it was like a month between that first experience and the next one. And then the experiences got, as I kept working, got more and more often. And then eventually I learned how to make it happen. And then I would practice it and learn how to make it happen more and more, and kept doing the practices and so forth. And eventually, I'd be working, reading or something, and I'd look away to see how long it took me to clear up my myopia. And at that point, one day I looked up, and immediately in that half a second or second that it took me to look from near to far, my vision cleared up. And so I could look at near and look far away. I went, oh, well, I've done it. You know, I've cleared up my myopia. So the whole thing took about a year and a half. And I was kind of a nut for doing all kinds of experiments with Bates's system and a technique that I learned about and then kind of evolved it for my own needs, using a small, different size small rubber balls to massage, kind of off yourself to kind of massage different places, and eventually realized I could massage with small balls around my eyes and around kind of a band of around my head. So I found these really interesting spots in the back of my head, and I would hold a small ball in my fingers and lie down on the floor and just work these areas. And I could feel the tension and the kind of discomfort going into my eyes when I did that. And so I would meditate, and I'd feel other places in my body connected to the place I was pushing. And I would just meditate. I would just hold those and meditate. And then at some point, it almost felt like a magnetic thing would pull the tension from out of those other places, and it would go out where the ball was hitting my skull. And at the time, I began to teach something called the Free University of Berkeley. I began to teach about these techniques, and I forgot my train of thought. So anyway, I was teaching this approach, and
That's
what I was going to say was, I said, you know, when I was teaching this particular balling, I called it balling technique, and I said this experience when the ball would kind of, something would happen in that meditation, and the pain or discomfort would kind of migrate toward the ball and go off, leave my body, and it left me in this altered state when it would happen. And so I said, you know, it reminds me of the Indian fakirs that lie on a bed of nails. That probably, it sounds like what they're doing is like what I did, is I spread the pain so that the pain wasn't so intense by spreading it out. And it left me in this kind of very interesting meditative place. And so about 3 days later, I got a phone call from one of the people in the class saying, quick, turn on channel 9. So I did, and there was somebody interviewing an Indian fakir whose specialty was, you know, lying on a bed of nails and describing exactly what I had described to the class. So so it's a form of meditation. That's what I found. And that was really important for my progress in learning how to improve my eyesight. Because before that, I'd kind of reached a plateau, and that really, really helped. So it's hard to divide, you know, what I'm doing with these eye exercises and meditation. So it leads me to what we were talking about before the TV thing started, the video started, is this use of the trampoline to improve people's attention skills and memory skills and body integration and coordination and body timing. So I have a book on that, which is called Stress Point. It's called Attention and Memory Training, Stress Point Learning on the Trampoline. And I learned this technique from an optometrist, and just really, really got into it and had amazing results with people. And so how I look on that is, it's kind of a Zen experience or a flow state experience. It's kind of an active, dynamic meditation that puts you in present time. And so the trampoline is important because it has timing built into it. So most training is to do the right thing, but this, like music, you have to do the right thing at the right time. And so you give exercises to do that might just be physical coordination exercises, but done in time to the trampoline, but also kind of cognitive exercises where you would be reading creating a list of numbers, and you had to say each number right on the bounce of the trampoline. But then you could put kind of distractors so that if you came to a number that was a number that repeated itself like 11 or 22 on this, it was actually a chart, then you would have to clap your hands instead of saying the number. And if you got to a number that started with a 6, you know, then you would have to say a color. I mean, so you would start easy, and that's what this idea of stress point is. You start easy enough that the person can succeed at it, their brain begins to organize, and then you make it slightly harder and slightly more difficult. And pretty soon you reach what's called the stress point, which is when they make a mistake. So now they have to do something inside to organize their brain at a better level, to be able to, higher level, to be able to do this work. And eventually what happens is they get really good.
To someone.
Pardon me?
What is a stress point do to someone?
Stress point, if you ask somebody to do something that's difficult, like if you went to an advanced yoga class, you know, then you would just be frustrated if you didn't do yoga before. But if you were already used to some yoga and you went to a beginning class, you might be bored with it and you could do it easily and so forth. So there's kind of an array of levels that you can try to do things at. If you do things that are too easy, you look good, but then then it's so easy you don't have to improve your brain organization to do it. You just kind of can do it. If you do something too difficult, then you get frustrated. You can't, whatever you do seems to make it worse, and you just get frustrated and angry, and you want to avoid it and so forth. So, but if you find the stress point, which is just a little bit higher than your ability at that moment, then and you can coach people or yourself to get up to another level. And at first, then you kind of stumble into it, and then eventually you get to a place where you can do it so well with flowing through it that you can actually begin to do things that are even more difficult within that. So you're multitasking and you're doing, so you really have to be present. And my idea of presence, which is what meditation is about, is that there's no time in the present, which means many things, but one of the ways I think about it is that the present includes what you just did and what you're about to do, and of course what you're doing. So it's like if you're going to your grandmother's house and you start off, then what you need to know where you left from, where you are, and where you're going. And then you can get there, you know when to turn and so forth. You're not going to get anxious that you're never going to make it because you know where you are in the path. And so life is like that.
Flight.
I just missed what you said.
Sorry, in my case, that's taking a flight and going across an ocean to go to her house. So it's a long process.
The long process. You make sure you don't stop in China. Anyway.
Hey, there's a lot that you've said so far that I just want to touch on, just to make sure that people watching this and myself even are following along, because you've said some extraordinarily interesting things that, I want to make sure they don't get lost in all the other extraordinary things that you're saying. When you speak of stress point, for instance, it reminds me of, in the yoga practice that I learned to teach, it reminds me of the description of being at an edge, where you're like at the edge of what you can do with ease, and then you get to this place, and when you learn to inhabit this place, or be present, as you say, present there and breathe there and fully aware of the pain or of whatever you're experiencing there, that it allows your consciousness to expand, and that's the presence aspect.
Yes.
That's one thing I heard. The other couple of things that were really interesting, that I found really interesting, is when you were saying, I believe you'd done lots of yoga, meditation, Tai Chi, this exploration of personal development through contemplative, meditative practices coming from the East. And then you came across this Natural Vision book in the bookstore. And you kind of realized, hey, a lot of these practices are like meditation, or they're like Tai Chi. And one of the things I want to ask you or go a little bit more into is like, what was it that was similar in that moment for you?
Well, they'll include breathing,
Okay.
um, and finding um, a level of presence, really.
Okay.
Um, and the Tai Chi part was, my Tai Chi teacher had written a book, and I was reading through his book, and I came across one of the things he said was Tai Chi is really important because it's movement around your abdominal area. It's a movement, it's full of movement around that, and that's really important for digestion and for balance and for getting yourself into a place. Well, one of one of Bates's exercises is called the long swing. And so in the long swing, you're standing up and you're moving back and forth like this. And you're trying to just be able to let go of your eyes and let your eyes kind of move without trying to hold them,
Mm-hmm.
and your body to move simply. So so anyway, there was movement around the waist, just like the Tai Chi teacher said. So I just saw these little parallels would kind of pop out. I'd say, oh, wow, that's what I'm doing already in Tai Chi.
So
Might
the
as well improve my
breathing,
eyesight.
the level of presence, and then the kinds of movements.
Yes.
Okay.
And that there's something called perceptual training, where you're actually training your nervous system to, in this case, to see in a different way.
Ooh,
Uh,
sounds like yoga
so
skills.
yeah, so it's like to see in a different way. In the case of Bates's work,
Uh-huh.
um, and so there's this whole kind of emerging science of the fact that the brain is plastic, and that by learning certain kinds of perceptual skills, you actually are changing your brain. You're changing the neurons in your visual cortex. You're changing uh, just a whole variety of things, and they talk about the timing of it, how long you should do it, what time of the day you should sleep between you do it again the next day, or I mean, it's like all these different things are coming out in it, but it's actually changing the DNA in your bodies to improve. You're actually changing your
Actually,
cellular.
your DNA
Yeah.
from
So
a scientific perspective.
yes. So that's where what's called brain plasticity or neurological practice, and that you've learned to do something that you couldn't do before. You're actually changing the way your neurons are firing. And so that's a trainable thing. So the question is, what's the limit of that? And so, as I say, it's fairly maybe a decade old that people have been using those terms. Uh, but you pick some skill like uh, when people get older, they have a harder time seeing menus because the contrast between the background and the letters
Mm-hmm.
is oftentimes ignored by the people who design these things. And so it's hard to read them because the contrast isn't there. It's like black on white versus dark gray
Okay.
on dark gray sort of thing. So there are training methods where you learn how to see contrast better. And that transfers to how you see the world. You've changed something in the way your brain works and improved that. They talk about that in terms of improving presbyopia,
Mm.
which we talk about. Um,
What I find really what I find extraordinary about your perspective, Ray, is that um, a lot of people who speak about meditation um, aren't necessarily able, for various reasons, to talk about the actual physical results that one can experience from it or from different practices related to meditation. And what I really find extraordinary about your perspective is that having delved into meditation, yoga, Tai Chi, and being able to see where the parallels are in natural vision improvement, in the practices that you've done in your own life that have cured your myopia, that you're able to really bring in the science into it in a way that presents like how someone's body can actually improve. Because I know people who have done cool things with their bodies, but they just can't say it's because of the meditation for various legal reasons. And I think it's extraordinary. I think your perspective is extraordinary in that sense. Like, you know, you were sharing your story and I was like, wait, really? Like I can cure my myopia? Because that would be amazing. But to really believe that, hey, practices that are very similar to maybe what I already do in meditation, but like tuned around what you said around neuroplasticity and the brain and all of that, like that can actually do things to my physical body. Like that's kind of mind blowing.
So you look like you're maybe a -8. You know what your prescription is?
Yeah, about -7, and then a bit of astigmatism about -1. Yeah, and I've had it. I grew up in Singapore, so I've had it since I was 6 or 7.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Well, it's not easy. As I say, I was only 1.25 diopter nearsighted.
Okay.
And it took me a year and a half, although I think the end is, I have had one patient who improved. She was a -13 with a lot of astigmatism, and she improved so that she was a -6. And but without her glasses, sometimes she could see 20/40 vision. That was the best. And another one that happened when I was in Berkeley, they both were when I was in Berkeley, was a young man, a 25-year-old guy. I think he was that old. And I think he was wearing a -2.5 or -3. And he came in and he says, I'd like to, study, learn from you. And he said, I want to come in 3 times a week. I said, fine. So he came and I taught him some things. And he came back 2 days later and I taught him a couple of more things. And he came back 3 times a week. And by the time, I can't remember if it was 2 weeks or 3 weeks later, he said, I'm not nearsighted anymore. I can see perfectly fine. And I said, oh my God, I've never had anybody have that quick of an experience. He said, well, here's what I did. And he said, I lived in my house had an attic, and I had a tent in the attic. That was my meditation, spiritual place. And he said, you would teach me these practices, and then I would go home and I would drop acid, and I would sit in my tent all day long doing your exercise. And the next day I would wake up and I'd drop acid and I would do the exercises all day. And the next day I'd come to see you, and he'd give me a new exercises, and I would do the same thing. And that was his plan. And I was just astounded. So maybe I shouldn't mention that, but these drugs from the 60s are, they're becoming more medically interesting, and things are changing with respect to them, just like marijuana, aspects of marijuana. And probably there's some aspects I've been reading about with nicotine, that they can purify and take away the negative part and improve learning and memory with a part that's metabolized from nicotine. So at the time, there's no way you could have studied marijuana or LSD or any of those other drugs. But now they're finding medical applications for these things, and they're more and more common.
Extraordinary.
So,
and I imagine also the sitting and practicing and exercise all day also has that effect.
That helped, I'm sure.
Yeah, one of the other threads that I found really interesting in what you said was timing and timelessness. So you were talking about about Bates and then the trampoline bit, and you said one of the important elements in the trampoline thing is a sense of timing. And then when you get to that place where you're in that stress point and where your perception is expanded,
It gels, yeah.
gels, then you're in this timeless space. So I was wondering if you could speak a bit to like the role of timing and timelessness in a practice like that?
Well, it turns out that if the brain expects something to happen at a certain time,
Mm-hmm.
then the response of the neurons is going to be higher amplitude. So it's like the brain works what they call it's a gated phenomenon. The gate is closed, and then when it opens, it's really ready for new information. And then it closes new information. Like in reading, when you move from one place to the other, your vision is kind of turned off. When you land, boom, you have a big, bright information that comes in. So if there's a rhythm, if you're trying to see something or learn something in the rhythm, then your brain is going to be getting ready and then opening at the right time, because your whole body is telling it when the time comes, because all your cells and everything, your senses and so forth, is at the bottom of the bounce together. So you're more oriented, more coordinated. And then that's the time that you give your answer, or you give the next thing in a sequence, or you do certain moves that you're learning how to do. So, and you can apply it to everything. You can apply it to learning music. I worked at a Sonoma State Hospital in California with cognitively impaired, what we called retarded adults, young adults, and they were fantastic. I mean, I was teaching the psych techs and the nurses and the teachers how to do this approach. And every week I'd come and I'd have 2 or 3 of the patients there. And I mean, I had one guy, I just worked with him for maybe 3 weeks, once for a half hour, once a week. And I somehow made a breakthrough, which was, everybody was just in tears. And after that, this man who was probably 29 years old, who never spoke, he could understand and he knew a few words, but he couldn't speak, suddenly began to be able to speak. Really amazing.
It's not just vision. Wow.
No, it works for everybody. I mean, it's attention and memory training. And then teaching yourself, like now I work with pianists. My wife is a pianist, and she started a festival called the Rebecca Penny's Piano Festival, and we have like 36 students, mainly international students from last year from 17 countries. And they have this great opportunity to study with some of the best teachers. If they're looking for a graduate school, these are all college or postgraduate level kids. And then I see them, and I put them on the trampoline, and I see whether their coordination is intact. Sometimes it's not. For example, they're jumping and they have to make their hands go in circles. I'll make it like this so you can see it. Okay, so some of them are like this. One circle is bigger than the other. They're jumping and making their hands go. It's not just their fingers. Okay, so you're like that. And you're jumping and jumping, and you look and you see that instead of the middle part being right in front of you, the middle part is off to the side, or one hand is bigger than the other, or one hand suddenly loses itself and it starts doing this movement instead of this movement.
Yeah.
So you see that even in these very highly trained, these are really high level piano students. And so I'm able to help say, oh, this is a problem. Your hands lose their coordination. Is that something that your teacher is working on to try to help you? Because when you're getting into these really complex things, your hands can become out of sync. And so they're not quite at the same timing. And so I said, well, it's showing up here. This is how we might be able to help you. So that's the physical coordination part of it. And it just gets more and more complicated. Besides this, and you can do this. I mean, there's a whole variety of things that you can go with training people's body integration.
And that was the same kind of training you used with the person who was cognitively impaired in development?
Yeah, I mean, he was like, I had to teach him how to jump on the trampoline. He couldn't figure it out. So I had to make it simple enough so that it's below his stress point. That's the practice, is to say, okay, what can this guy do? Because he can't jump. So I said, okay, I want you to lie on the trampoline. I'm going to stand up above you, and I'm going to hold your belt. And I had him go up and down like that. And then I had him get up on his hands and knees.
Trampoline that's powerful, or is it being at the stress point that's powerful?
Both. I mean, you don't need the trampoline, except that it's a really nice tool. People generally like it. You know, kids especially. I was working with a lot of kids with learning problems.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's totally, and so as long as I'm sensitive and kind, so that I'm saying, oh, wait a minute, we used to be right at the stress point, but something happened and suddenly now you're down here. Your ability, this is the stress point, this is the demand and this is your ability. Okay. So for example, what I would often see is that with a pianist, I start out with some task that they're supposed to do and then make it a little bit harder and suddenly they make a mistake. And you can just see their brain kind of dissolve in terms of its coordination. And they, you know, now instead of being at the stress point, they've dropped all the way down here. Now they're going to get frustrated and angry and mad at you and, you know, so forth. So I'm teaching them to become aware of when their edge is lost and to recover from it as quickly as they notice it. And how do you recover from it? You come in lower than your ability. So now you can easily do it, and that helps to organize your brain. And then you come again to this place where you have to bring, I mean, one of the most common things that I would hear children say that were having learning problems is because the parent would be there, say, try harder, Johnny. And I'd say, shh, don't, that's not the way we work around here. Because they would say, the problem is everybody's telling me to work harder. And when I do, everything falls apart. I can't make an effort and succeed. So that's an awful position. It's a helpless position.
So when you're hearing that try harder, where is that kid on this stress point, surpassing it, falling back scale? Okay,
so this is how smart you are at the time. Okay, and this is something that's too easy to do.
Okay.
So you're going to get bored and not really grow very much from it. And so you get closer and closer, and you finally reach a point where you're a little bit harder than your present level of organization. So you're probably going to make a mistake.
Yeah.
Okay. So for some people, it's a tragedy. It's like their word fell apart because they made a mistake. Other people say, okay, well, let me try again. And so I'm coaching them to be able to bring their attention up to the level, which one was attention? This one. To bring it up to the level where they can actually succeed, stay there, so now they can do this particular cognitive experience. And now I say, okay, can you do it, but this time, instead of doing this, do this in addition to it. Like, so instead of just, like if they're spelling a sentence while they're jumping, and I say, when you come to the space between words, then I want you to bounce, but don't say anything.
Okay.
And when you come to a vowel, I want you to clap your hands, but not say the name of the vowel. Okay, so now they have to be able to look ahead. And what happens to some people is they're constantly looking back to see if they did it right for that little fraction of a second. So they're not anticipating. They've kind of shrunk their presence, so they're not present anymore. Okay, so what you're looking for in this flow experience, in this meditative state, this present state, is you're looking to say, yes, I know what I'm doing is correct. I know what I just did is correct. And I don't have to keep looking at this because I know I'm going to do it correctly. Now I can look ahead. So you got the past.
What happens if you know that what you just did was wrong? How do you stay in that?
Well, then we have something. So usually people aren't aware of the fact that they made a mistake. That's really common. Okay, so one of the principles, things that we're working with is called recovery.
Hmm.
So recovery means, so what happens in recovering, you say, okay, I want you to spell this sentence, the boy went home, while you're jumping on the trampoline.
Okay.
And I want you to count the spaces. So in between each word, you're going to say 1 on the first space, 2 on the next space.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so in other words, you start with something that they can do easily. You add something onto it until finally they're having to really reorganize at a higher level. So when they get into that place, then you start stressing them. Okay, like for example, I'm going to try to make you make a mistake,
Yeah.
and so they're doing what they were doing before, and I say blah blah blah, or 2 and 2 is 6, or slap my hands, or something, and they have to keep knowing that I'm doing that, but keep their attention. And so the first thing that happens, they make a mistake, and the instruction is when you make a mistake, you have to stop and tell me what the mistake was, and then go back to the beginning, because we're trying to extend their attention span, because people have a certain place where they cut out and then they're not thinking anymore. So so that first they don't notice, they don't notice they made mistakes. The second level is they know they're supposed to notice it, stop, and tell me what it was as soon as they can.
Okay.
So, and then start over again. So at first they don't notice, then they get to the end, they say, I think there was something that I did that was wrong. And I'll say, well, can you tell me where it was? And I'll take my finger and go along say the sentence in this case. And they say, well, I think it was right there. And I say, yeah, that's right. Let's try it again. So the next time they can actually stop and say, oh, I know what I did was this. But I said, you're supposed to stop right away. So I said, okay. So then at some point, they get to the point where they start to make a mistake. And then they realize, no, that it's a space they've got to count instead of not saying anything. And they make an effort, but they can't quite succeed at it. And the next level is they actually succeed at correcting it, of recovering, except that it was such an effort that they can't go on. They make a mistake in the next couple of bounces. And pretty soon they can make it and not fall apart right after that. And eventually they do what I call recovery, which is that they're so good at knowing in advance that they're going to make a mistake that they can actually change it. So with a pianist, for example, their mind wanders and they come back so quickly that the audience doesn't know that well, as compared to most times.
They've gotten so into the zone that they can catch when their focus is wandering, and they're able to bring it back before.
Yeah, there's a part of the brain. There's a part of the brain that knows before you're going to make a mistake that you're going to make a mistake. And it's can be conscious or unconscious. For example, one thing I read was you're walking and you don't notice it consciously, but that part of your brain notices that if you keep walking and put your foot where you're going to put it, you're going to turn your ankle because there's something there that you didn't notice. And it'll actually stop you from doing it and have you recover from it without your even knowing it.
And I may not have known that I just recovered from an ankle sprain. That didn't happen.
That's correct.
Good God.
Or you might be aware of it. But the point is that the brain has that capacity. And so you're kind of making that aspect of how our brain works become stronger, become more integrated into how I am in the present moment. So recovery is, so you ask what happens when they make a mistake, is that we work on recovery.
That's extraordinary.
We work on them knowing that they did it right. I say, how did you do that time? They go, I did it right. I say, no, right here there was something. Remember what it was? Or they finish and I go, did you do that right? With that kind of look on my face. And they go, no. And I said, no, you did do it right. But I want you to know that you did it right. So there's all these little aspects of it that enhance the person's, one of the stresses that we have in life is some people when they're going to do something that's difficult,
Yeah.
they'll their self-perception drops, and they think, "Oh my God, this is going to be so difficult."
Yeah, I think that all the time. I
Yeah,
think I'm
well,
doing interviews for this. I think, God, this is going to be awful. I can't do this. Yeah. So,
so so that's called self-efficacy. It was a particular scientist that talked about this a lot, which is uh, a person's success to some extent depends upon their ability to know whether to have confidence that they're actually going to be able to succeed at the thing that they're going to do next. If they don't think they can succeed, even though they should be able to succeed, then they kind of undersell themselves, and that kind of makes them fall apart. And there's other people that overestimate their self-efficacy, and they think something's going to be easy, and then they start to do it, and it turns out to be much more difficult than them. So they're constantly getting themselves in trouble that way.
and these exercises,
The idea is, yeah,
these meditation-related exercises, or these exercises that involve, well, this.
I call it meditation, Zen. It's kind of a Zen meditation. Yes.
So these exercises, these kind of Zen exercises, they help with people's self-efficacy and focus and their confidence as well.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
you keep talking about like higher organization, like when you do something that the mind organizes better. Well, what does that mean?
It means it's more able to take more information in more easily and to stay present. In other words, if you're really paying attention well, your mind is going to be organized in a certain way. You know, your brain pathways are going to be working together and so forth and so forth. If you're not able to do it, then your brain isn't organized well enough to be able to succeed at that. Maybe you don't understand what you're going to do fully, and so forth.
Helps you organize that brain.
By being at the stress point and then warming up during that. In other words,
yeah.
If I'm working with somebody and it might be a whole paragraph that I'm seeing whether they can. One example is I can teach you how to say the alphabet backwards. Okay. Oh my God, I'd never be able to do that. I said, well, I think we can see what happens. So I write the last four letters
forwards without singing the whole song.
Well, that's right. You know, how well do you learn things? That's another aspect of it. We generally are happy if we're teachers or our kids, if they're competent at doing something. But there's a whole other level above that we should be working for. It's like, can you play the right notes at the right time on the piano? It's not the same thing as playing a just moving rendition of that piece. There's other levels. Okay.
And what are the effects of that in someone's life? Just greater performance in every aspect, greater art, greater sleep?
In other words, if I notice that one of the piano students is constantly, when they get toward the end, the last part of what they're doing, like spelling the sentence backwards without looking, or just any of these variety of levels that you can take people and train their particular brain functions. So it turns out that every time that Johnny, gets to a certain place toward the end of what they're doing, their brain wanders. It's like they go, I've made it. And then their brain kind of drops out. They stop paying attention at the same level. And so for some, if I see that with a piano student, for example, I'll say, do you tend to make an error at the end of your piece? Say, yeah, I do that all the time. My teachers get so mad at me too. So I just start working with them to change that. So if you're learning something, the question is how, like the music, how well are you supposed to learn it? So there's like some questions that you need to ask yourself if you're trying to learn to do something new. And the first question is, can I do it? So, so the person's working on a piece and they're trying to learn a phrase, and they get to the point where they can actually do it, hit all the notes at the right time. They go, great, I've got it. They say, no, no, there's 5 questions. That's only the first question. Doesn't really sound like music yet. The first question is, can I do it? The second question is, can I do it well? Can I really make it flow and sound like music? Say, oh, okay, that makes sense. So then they work, which is harder. Now they've got to discipline themselves. So, so then finally I get to the place, like, yeah, I really did that well. So I said, well, great. Are you going to go home and either, are you going to keep working on it, or are you satisfied with yourself? So now you got the kind of confidence. But so no, that's only the second question. You have to ask yourself the next question. So what's that? The next question is, can I do it well every time I try to do it for as long as I want? Oh my God, that too? If you really want to be good at what you're doing. And unfortunately, schools, tend to draw, that's not part of, can I get the right answer is it, but they don't look at these other levels above that. So finally they can get to where, in my work, I would say, can you do it again? I do that. 3, if they could do it again with total flow and presence, then I say, aha, okay, now we're ready for the next step, which is, can I do it in a different way? So the example, because I've been mainly working with pianists, is so the pianist learns how to get the piece. They can play it well every time, and then they go in for their lesson, and now they could play something really well. Now they go in and they play it, make a mistake right in front of their teacher, or in front of the audience if they're at the thing. Say, oh, what happened? Well, they've always played it in the same piano, in the same room, facing the same direction, but they go into their teacher's piano in a different room with different acoustics and different echoes, and suddenly they get thrown off because they've only learned it in one kind of narrow way. So the next question is, can I accept change? Can I do it a different way? Can I play it louder? Can I play it slower? Can I play it faster? Can I make the dynamics greater? Can I play it on a different piano? Can I play it with somebody looking at me? And so forth. So the first question is, can I do it? The next question is, can I do it well? Can I do it well every time I try for as long as I want? And
Yeah.
the next question is, can I accept change, do it in a different way and do it well? So each of those takes another level of fine tuning to be able to get to that place where you can do it on a new way, on a different instrument, and do that, answer those same questions. It's a totally other level of learning. So the problem is that our educational system leaves that out. They don't go up to the level of mastery. You want to become right? So
No,
that's really important. So,
wow.
what's that?
This is blowing my mind. I feel like this is, I feel like I'm having a genuine epiphany here. I have to thank you because, like, I always feel like I suck at focusing, and anyone who knows me well will happily mirror the same thing to me, that like I tend to like do a billion things and not do any one extraordinarily well just because I don't tend to focus. And when I hear you speak, I can see almost clearly, like, and I'd love your opinion on this, but almost as though like I bring myself to a place where I do something well enough, but then not necessarily with full presence. Like the only times in my life where I felt masterful and like I'm actually in that flow state weaving things is either A, when I'm meditating, which is why I like doing it, B, when I'm dancing or performing classical Indian dance, or C, if I have a deadline in 3 hours and have to write a 3,000 word essay in those 3 hours. Like besides like those 3 conditions, I rarely feel like focused. It's kind of like my brain is like all over.
Is that why you got into meditation?
Um, I think I got into it because I just loved it.
Okay. Anyway, so it's a form of meditation. Another concept that I developed when I was, it's another subject, but we'll go into it, that I developed. So there I was an optometrist,
Mhm.
uh, and I got Bates's book, which I heard about, but
Mhm.
warned against in optometry school, that this guy's a quack, don't even read his book. The one that said, hey, this is like yoga and Tai Chi and so forth. So I thought, how am I going to explain myself to my colleagues when I'm doing this? And what I imagine them saying to me is, how can you believe in this approach? It doesn't make any sense. It's all wrong. That's what all the newspaper, the magazine articles say about the journalists. I say, well, I don't, it's an experiment. I want to see if it works. It's an experiment. So that became my theme. So if I say, okay, I'm going to do this Bates practice and this Bates practice for an hour on Saturday morning in the park. Okay, so I say, so, okay, so it's an experiment. I wonder what would happen if I did the Bates system on myself. I wonder what would happen if I did those exercises for an hour in the park. I wonder what would happen if I did this every day for uh, uh, 10 weeks or 3 weeks.
Mhm.
If I were a smoker, I would say, I wonder if I could not smoke until Friday. Something easy enough that you can succeed at. Okay, so it's an experiment. So if you can't do it, then you found out the answer to the experiment. You're not a failure. You're not stupid. You did an experiment. All the great scientists have experiments that didn't come out the way they expected them to, and sometimes that leads to their greatest breakthrough, which is they go, "Why didn't it work the way that I thought it was supposed to?" And suddenly they discover a new enzyme or a new theory or whatever. You understand what I'm saying? So that kind of takes some of the anxiety out of doing it, which is really a big deal, a level of anxiety. You want to let your brain be able to, and so so doing these things actually, it is a kind of meditation. It has the same word, it's the same brain that's working, the same body that's working.
And some extraordinary
So
things that you've gone over.
So that's become my life, and it was a large part of it was based on my own personal experience of working on myself, and that became for the most part, became my mastery of doing therapy, being able to take a nonverbal person and 3 weeks later have them be verbal. I never expected that, but a lot of different ways that I work. I work very spontaneously. Did body work on patients, my myopic patients, taught them the ball technique. And then one day, at some point I was teaching, Mayor Snyder and I had a practice. We started a practice together in San Francisco back 45 years ago. And we were teaching a class once a week for 10 weeks, I think it was, on eye improvement. And most of the people were nearsighted and in their 20s. But there was one guy that was 52, and he was farsighted, a little farsighted, and wearing a strong reading prescription. And I thought, well, okay, we're teaching him palming, which is a Bates exercise, and sunning, which is another Bates exercise. And and I said, well, I wonder if there's anything special that I could teach. So I thought of this idea based on what we know scientifically about how the eyes work, and clinically about how the eyes work. And I said, with a young person, if I had them do this particular um, action with their eyes,
Mhm.
then their focus would get stronger for near distance. I wonder what would happen with somebody with presbyopic, which is where you lose the flexibility of your focus system, like your camera, like your iPhone. You can look at something close, it'll focus on it, look at something far. And in the brain, that happens also.
Mhm.
automatically, just like an automatic camera does. Um, but uh, but there's a particular thing that happens with how much you're crossing your eyes. So if I'm crossing my eyes to the point where my two lines of sight are at that distance,
Yeah.
it would be very convenient if my focus were also clear at that distance.
Okay.
So that if I'm looking far away where my eyes are almost parallel lines of sight, uh, when you look far away without your glasses, you're focused here, at just, just 14 centimeters away from from your face. But your eyes are looking parallel. So the organization between where your eyes are aiming in terms of how far away something is, you
Mhm.
look more cross-eyed at something when it's closer and less so far away. Uh, so organizing it so that where your eyes are aiming in terms of their position and where your focus is clear, coordinating those two things suddenly became like an important idea for me. And so I made a chart um, for this guy, Paul, and taught him how to do it. And asked him beforehand, look at the letters on this chart that I'm going to give you. Learn how to cross your eyes in a certain way. Uh, what happens? And he could do it easily. And he said, wow, I could only see the big E on that chart. Now I can see two lines lower. The letters are much more dark. They're contrasted. So I said, great, go home and practice. He came back the next week. I said, how are you doing? He said, can I have 5 more charts? I said, why? He said, I thought maybe he wants one for his wife and one for his neighbor, And I said, why? He says, because I love doing the chart. I just love how it feels. My eyes feel great when I do it. Not everybody, it's not true for everybody. And he said, I want one for the kitchen so I can do it if I'm in the kitchen. I want one in the TV room. I want one in the bathroom. I want one in the bedroom. One in my car when I'm waiting for the train. I want one for my office. So I made 5 more charts. He came in the next week and he said, for 3 days, I haven't had to wear my glasses for distance or near. I read all day long at work. I don't have any strain without glasses. And I said, wow, that's amazing. Just 11, he had been doing that for 3 days. So it was 11 days since he started. He totally reversed his farsightedness and his
That's
presbyopia.
extraordinary.
Just, just extraordinary. I didn't tell anybody because they already knew I was enough. It's, I mean, if you ask any eye doctor, they'll say you can't escape it unless you do surgery or all these new things that they're
And
trying
this
to
is
do.
for presbyopia, right? That's the word?
This is for presbyopia, which is the old sight, which is when people get to be in their 40s or
Extraordinary.
50s. You have to wear reading glasses. So,
We're way over time, and I'm mindful that you have somewhere to be. Is there anything you'd like to say to wrap it up, or in conclusion, or anywhere people can find out more about you, or anything you want to share?
well, there is a website that I don't have very much on, just a little talk about me. I keep not putting stuff on it that I want to put on it. You mentioned that I could offer something for free for people.
Excellent.
But can you, if I send it to you, can they contact you and get it?
100%.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So so I have a book about the trampoline work, and my desire, I think it's fantastic work, and it's not very well known, and one of my missions is to make it better known, to make it actually have an impact on education and rehabilitation and all these sorts of things. It's because it's I don't know. I mean, I think it's great. And the guy who invented it called me up about 10 or so years ago and said, uh, I'm afraid that I wake up in terror every night, afraid that my work is going to die when I die. And so I said, I'll help you any way I can because it was very important for me personally as well as professionally. So then he died about 5 years ago. And I just have been I've been lecturing around the world and so forth. But it's, you lecture and then you don't know if somebody's actually doing it. Did they really do it? And it turns out, for the most part, I think people are using it. So I'm lecturing mainly to professionals, psychologists and music teachers and optometrists.
Sure.
But I want to do more. I want to make it, happen more. So I'm willing to send the book out in digital form if people are interested in it.
I'm sure
So
people will be
do
very
that.
happy with that, especially after hearing
Yeah.
what you just shared about trampolining. I mean, that's it.
Yeah, so you can get a small trampoline or a slightly bigger one. They sell for less than $100. You can get
Yeah.
one that's 4 feet in diameter. Most of the small trampolines are like 3 feet in diameter.
Rick, you
Have a
have
slightly.
in 20 minutes, and I don't want to keep you late for that at all.
Okay.
Yeah. But
So, and I'll also send the instructions on how to use the presbyopia chart.
perfect. Perfect.
Okay. So people are interested in either one of those, they can contact you,
Fantastic.
and they'll be able to get that.
That's
Okay.
extraordinary.
So
Thank you for sharing everything that you have. This is really incredible work that you've done. And honestly, I feel very honored and lucky to be able to present that in the context of meditation because of your path that's led to it and the way that you describe it. Thank you. I hope this reaches a lot of people and touches a lot of lives.
me too. Me too. So anyway, I can, so I'll send that to you and we'll see what happens. Okay.
Fantastic.
Well, thank you for following your instincts and asking me to do this. And good luck in your project. I think it'll be really helpful and useful for people. So good luck. Nice to meet you on face-to-face. And maybe we'll get together at some point.
Oh, I'd love that.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so let me keep track of what's going on and let me know.
I'll keep you in the loop, 100%.
Good luck to everybody out there. Okay.
All right. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Have a good appointment.